look at the book Atlantis, the Antediluvian World, a modern revised edition. Now, when we look at this book, we're going to notice a few things about the descriptions of the ancient ones or the ancient peoples, the so-called black race or Negro race. Now, what they've taught us is that Negroes only come from one continent, but we know that is not true. If we believe in Pangea, we know that the whole world was once populated by so-called black people or different bloodlines of melanated people, whatever word you choose to use in this modern time. Also, we know that winners control history, his story. So of course, we should know that we are written out of the history books. That's why it's important to look at books from the 1817 and so forth to know and understand that they use different words to describe the so-called black or Negro race. But we'll look at who we were and what we were in this book. And this is an 1832 or 1880, mid-80s book by a Caucasian man. And look what he says about the so-called black or Negro race of peoples. Because we are the ancient ones, right? The star seeds. So we're reading at page 180, and we're going to read from the second paragraph. And it reads, "We thus find the sons of Ad at the base of all the most ancient races of men, to wit, the Hebrews, the Arabians, the Chaldeans, the Hindus, the Persians and Egyptians, the Ethiopians, the Mexicans, and of the Central Americans, testimony that all these races trace their beginning back to the dimly mentioned Atlantis."
I am a black Egyptian. My father is much darker than I am. My mother is lighter than I am. In Egypt, people are identified by the religion first, not the race. So in Egypt, if you are Christian, you are a minority person. But if you're black, you're not a minority person. You are a part of the mainstream society. And I came from this background. And in Egypt, you identify as Arab and as Muslim. And in this country, when I first came, I identified myself as Arab American and Muslim first. And gradually, I became to identify myself as black. I came to the U.S. in 1978, and I became U.S. citizen in 1985. When I became a U.S. resident, I was told by the Immigration and Naturalization that I am white. And I told them that I'm black, and they said, no, in this country, you are white. All Arabs in this country, all Arab immigrants are white.
So we know that the Caucasians base history on color destinations. And we know from the scriptures it's based on bloodline or seed lines, or in today's modern term, race. But as we can see from the book, we know that the ancient races were of a Negroid phenotype. Okay, let's continue back to the third or fourth paragraph. "The traces of red men or copper-colored races are found in many parts of the continent. Richard divides the true Negroes into 4 classes, and his second class is thus described. Other tribes have forms and features like the European. Their complexion is black or a deep olive or a copper-colored approaching to black, while their hair, though often crisp and frizzled, is not in the least woolly. Such are the Yashar'EL and the Dinko and the Hazara, if I'm pronouncing that right, excuse my pronunciation on some of these words, and the darkest of the Abyssinians. The complexion and hair of the Abyssinians vary very much, their complexion ranging from almost white to dark brown or black, and their hair from straight to crisp frizzled and almost woolly. Some of the Nubians are copper-colored or black with a tinge of red. On the northern coast of Africa between the Mediterranean and the Great Desert, including Morocco, Algiers, Tunis, Tripoli, and Benza, if I'm pronouncing that right, there is a continuous system of highlands which have been included under the general term Atlas, anciently Atlantis, now the Berberi states. Throughout Berberi, we encounter a particular group of races, which is a bloodline or seed line, subdivided into many tribes of various shades, now spread over a vast area, but which formerly had its principal and perhaps aboriginal keyword abode along the mountain slopes of Atlas. The real name of these Berbers in Metzera, if I'm pronouncing it right, with the article prefixed or suffix T Amazer or Amazer T, meaning free, dominant, or noble race. We have every reason to believe the Berbers existed in the remotest times with all their essential moral and physical particularities. They existed in the time of Menes in the same condition in which they were discovered by the Phoenician navigators previously to the foundation of Carthage. They are a indomitable nomadic people who, since the introduction of camels, have penetrated in considerable numbers into the desert and even as far as Negrita. Some of these clans are white, others black with woolly hair. And keyword, they always use white first. So they're trying to interject their, white first, and, minorities or so-called black second. But we know that black is, melanin is a dominant and so-called white is a recessive genes. Okay, so black people were here on the earth first, if we're using modern terms, right? So now we're going to be reading from the book Angelic Realities, and we're going to start at the bottom of the paragraph on page 24, and it reads, the GA Signet Council 6, Council of Yashar'EL, if I'm pronouncing it right, from Sirius B, reclaimed 10 of the 12 CDT plates under their protection in 216 BC. 2 of the 12 CDT plates and all 12 signet shields fell into the hands of various competing human and fallen angelic legions on Earth during the course of human evolution since this time. In the 1600s, the Azurites secured one of the missing CDT plates. In November of 1999, the last of the 12 CDT plates, once called the Tables of Testimony by the Knights of Templar races, was retrieved by the Azurites from a contemporary Freemason family line through which possession of the CDT plate had been passed from Atlantean generations. Keyword, Atlantean generations. Okay, let that sink in. The 12 signet shields still remain buried in various hidden locations on Earth. Since the time of the 208-216 BC cataclysm, the Zurite races of the Sirius B Council of Yashar'EL have periodically offered dispositions of knowledge translated from the CDT plates to the evolving human cultures on Earth. Translations of the CDT plates were the first foundations of all legitimate spiritual teachings among all races of Earth. Before the genuine CDT plate, translations were repeatedly compromised, destroyed, and distorted into religious control dogmas. I repeat, distorted into religious control dogmas by competing factions of corrupt human power elite and the fallen angelic visitors. Each time the Zurites offered return of CDT plates translations, 3 CDT plate speakers incarnate, not recarnate, incarnate through the Majara race line council of Yashar'EL from Sirius into the human indigo child grail line on Earth. See Voyagers Volume 1 to serve as the 3 CDT plate translators or speakers. The first CDT plate speaker is trained for the position from childhood through physical contact with the Zurite races and priests of Ur, and serves as mentor for the CDT plate speakers 2 and 3. The 3 CDT plate speakers are always contemporaries and work closely and cooperatively together, collectively representing on Earth and translations of the CDT plates to which they are commissioned over a 12-year period of time. The tradition of selecting only 3 CDT plate speakers who are entrusted members of the Emerald Order incarnate in human form is a security measure that has always been employed by the Zurite races in order to protect the integrity and intended purity of the CDT plate translations. In Atlantean times, the most commonly known third CDT plate speaker was a Nuberian Anunnaki Atlantean by the name of Thoth. In 340 BC, Thoth was entrusted by the Emerald Order Melchizedek, which we know in the scriptures as Shem, Coloster, and Azurite races, to bring oral translation of parts of one CDT plate into specific segments of Atlantean culture. During this time, Thoth defected from the Emerald Covenant in favor of Nuberian Anunnaki Dominion agendas, translating portions of the CDT plate into written form in a text that became known as the Emerald Tablets of Thoth. Thoth presented the Emerald Tablets to the then corrupt Anu Melchizedek priesthood of Atlantis, which accumulated in the final destruction of the Atlantean islands in 955-8 BC. That's why we get the Atlantic Ocean, because they know that island of Atlantis existed. And of course, we are descendants from them because it all traces through the scriptures, it traces through our surnames and so forth. They're not writing these books, for pure fiction. There is a truth and a history to this, spiritually, physically, and so forth. But we have to put together the pieces. And yes, in our world, color does matter. We can't sit here and say that it doesn't, but we shouldn't let that be the end all be all, because we have to know these certain elements of truth. And subsequent chaos of human evolution since the colonization of Sumerian culture, in 2040 BC, another attempt to bring translation of the CDT plates to Earth was rendered through an individual by the name of Enoch, who served as second CDT plate speaker in that time period. Enoch's CDT plate translation consisted of 3 volumes of history that were once contained in the Mahabharata, the Book of Amenti, the Angelic Rosters, and the Book of the Dragon.
Shalom and greetings. When are we going to learn that they tell us the truth through satire and art form? Art imitates life and life imitates art. What we see on the news is not even half of the truth, but it's propaganda. But they tell you the truth in these films and in these movies. It's just that most people will never accept or can't handle the truth. Genesis chapter 3, 14 through 15. And the Lord God, Yahweh, said unto the serpent, because thou hast done this, thou art cursed above all cattle, and above every beast of the field. Upon thy belly shalt thou go, and the dust shalt thou eat all the days of thy life. And I will put enemy between thee and the woman, and between thy serpent seed and her seed. It shall bruise thy head, and thou shalt bruise his heel. Now there's a good show on Showtime called The Man Who Fell to Earth. Now we know in these films they use a lot of symbolisms, okay? We also got to consider that in 1994 they had a show called Cosmic Slop, an episode called Space Traitors, where these extraterrestrials wanted melanin, the so-called black race, or so-called black people, African Americans, and they took us in these spaceships. We also know by the scriptures, Elijah was taken by whirlwind. Second Kings chapter 2, verse 1. And it came to pass when Yahweh would take up Elijah into heaven by a whirlwind, that Elijah went with Elisha from Gilgal. So now we're at the Bible Hub, 2 Kings chapter 2, verse 1. Up to heaven, Hasamayan, if I'm pronouncing that right. Strong Hebrew 8064. Heaven, heavens, plural, sky, visible heavens, sky as abode of the stars, as the visible universe, the sky atmosphere, etc. Heaven as the abode of God or Yah. In a whirlwind, Basara, Strong Hebrew 5591, tempest, storm, whirlwind, tempest. Keyword, storm. As we can see in the film, he was taken up to heaven.
Open your eyes. But I'm gonna make you the god they can't ignore.
So they know our history. They have our ancient books, and they put it in these films. Our eyes are like cameras. We see certain images and whatnot through the physical realm, but the spiritual realm is the real world.
I am from Antia, a terrestrial planet beyond your solar system.
So we're going to look up the etymology of the word terrestrial, adjective, late 14th century, of or pertaining to earth. Let's see, Latin terratus, earthly, of earth, on land, from terra, earth, from pi root, tears, to dry, originally opposed to celestial. Natural history, sense of living on land, is attested from 1630s. The noun meaning a human being, a mortal, is recorded from 1590s. So sometimes when we hear the word extraterrestrial, it may also mean extra terrain, meaning to more land, or, interdimensional, or what's beyond the ice wall, if you choose to believe in that, and so forth. Now we're back on Angelic Realities, page 24. Earth human race lines or bloodlines, star seeds, and the DNA substrand matrix. The original human design itself is of an extraterrestrial or angelic nature, in that humans originally inhabited the second density, dimensions 4, 5, and 6, time fields of Earth, where Earth is called Terra. The Terran, original human, is called the Terranianism. Earth humanity's stellar genetic heritage can be found in the DNA substrand matrix, the many electrotonal electrical sound frequency or scalar straining wave templates that make up the blueprint for the human DNA. So we have to ask ourselves, from reading the first paragraph, it says original human, which we read in Genesis that the first man was made from the dust of the ground, which was melanin carbon rich, so-called black, or the Negro race in itself, is made of a extraterrestrial or angelic nature. So when we read the book of Genesis, we have to break down the word that gen, which means gene, is the DNA, the blueprint of our creator who created us, right? It only makes sense. So when we look at the etymology of words, gene, genetics, a segment of DNA that is involved in producing a polypeptide chain. It can include regions preceding and following the coding DNA, as well as introns between the exons. It is considered a unit of heredity. Okay, and we know that sister is just abbreviation for cis, a female person who has the same parents as another person. So it's hereditary, of the same bloodline. So now we're going to read the second paragraph, and it states, in the earth human lineage known as the Adamai Kuman human, 7 root races and 5 cluster races were seeded. Each root race evolution cycle developed one of the first 5 strands of DNA within the 12-strand DNA template. Each cluster race carried the 7th through 12th DNA strand template corresponding to the higher dimensional density systems. Root race incarnates are called earth seeds, and cluster race incarnates are called star seeds. The cluster races keep the 12-strand DNA template potentials alive within the Earth-human gene pool and represent the advanced stages of a human evolution. The cluster race human 12-strand DNA template is known as the Diamond Sun DNA. Consciousness incarnating into Diamond Sun cluster race biology enters from the 10th through the 12th dimensions. Incarnations in root race biology enter from the 3rd through the 6th dimensions. All root race humans have the potential to receive genetic acceleration through bioregenesis technology that will allow for regeneration of the 12-strand cluster race DNA template. Throughout the course of the Earth human history, there has been further hybridization with various interstellar races, creating more varieties of star seeds among the Earth seed root race populations. So if you believe that art imitates life and life imitates art, then you're aware that the show there is a quote-unquote Negro or so-called black man as a reptilian humanoid, and of course he adapts to the Earth's atmosphere or realm, and he blends in with the so-called black people. Now there's a book called The Code, and many books about the Anunnaki and so forth. We also see in the book of Genesis about the serpent. Now some people claim that the serpent doesn't represent Satan, because we know that in scriptures and anything in life, there's duality. There is good and there is evil. So we cannot absolutely say that the serpent means someone that is evil per se, right? So now we're going to read the book, The Code to the Matrix. And it says the Anunnaki themselves appear to be originally reptilian. However, they have blended with various life essence, and thus their appearances vary. In addition, the Anunnaki themselves seldom interact with humans directly. They use their underlings, who are humans, infused with Anunnaki genes, and in that state, they are wholly indebted to the Anunnaki and are controlled by them through a mental, collective, cellular connection. Bear with me, I might butcher some of these names, but it says other names of the Anunnaki and their offspring are Anakim. This is why Anakin Skywalker is Darth Vader in the Star Wars series. They are the Celtic Tuatha Dan, sons of Dan or Danu. They are offspring and servants of Sumerian, EA pronounced Ayan. This is why the new name for our planet is Earth. 3 wise men came from the east, and the major Christian celebration is called Easter. They are the Sumerian El, Akkadian Alu, and Babylonian Ilu. In English, Elf, called by their worshippers the Shining Ones, or is it Sinning Ones? They altered man, a downgrade, calling them Lulu, meaning mixed one, and Adapa, modeled man, who the Hebrews called Adam. Now it says in his notes, page 5, the Sumerians claimed their ancestors were reptilian Anunnaki who genetically modified them to be slaves. It is of value to keep in mind the Sumerians say they were hybridized and made as slaves, while other legends simply say they intermingled with their population. So now we're going to read page 16 notes, and it states, there is recorded knowledge of 1/3 of the angles or angels in the sphere of Saturn rebelling. Those fallen ones came to earth and intermingled with woman, thus creating the term mankind, meaning kind of like man, but not entirely. Now we know scientifically speaking that white Caucasian scientists have said that the original humans were Negroid or Africoid peoples. So let's let that sink in for a minute. No matter how fictitious this may seem, it is in fact true. These beings go under the names Rephaim or Nephilim, the Anunnaki, Titans, Giants, and Danites, along with their offspring. They make up the legends of various mythological creatures of various titles. This resulted from the union of the angels with not only the woman but also with the animals. These offspring became known as demigods, meaning half gods, half man or animal. They possessed various powers that caused the indigenous tribes of the time to worship the supreme creators, which was far from truth. Page 33 notes, looking at our world today, one should not be surprised that the destruction and chaos beyond preconceived proportion could be possibly looming in the future. We have the NWO Zionists, who've been here since the early or late 1800s, who no longer want money, only blood. The Anunnaki ship Nibiru, or Planet X, which can be seen from the South Pole, lazily headed this way. The end of the 13th moon Mayan calendar, global warming beyond reversal, anti-crisis in Las Vegas, in India, Pensacola, and the Feathered Serpent scheduling a tour, the proposed alien invasion warming their ships, the galactic line up clicking into place, a population doubling by 2012, and that's debatable because we got to remember that they've changed the calendars. We switch to Julian or Gregorian, whatever the calendar's names are. We do not know what correct time it is. Time is just an illusion based of who's controlling this society, and a host of other wild cards to give us a jolt into the future. It is safe to say maybe one should start tuning into a higher energy and phone home just in case one of these things just happens, or maybe even all of them all at the same time. Now, what do we say in the scriptures? Swing low, sweet chariot, coming forth to carry me home. Doesn't that ring a resonance to it? Even with all the atrocities and the chaos that's looming around us, these people are not leaders of us. I mean, look around you. I've been alive on this earth for 36 years. I lived through the 90s, 2000s, and so forth. You know, 90s was a very special era, but 2000s was, earth shaking in a sense. But, I told my pops that, there will never be no real justice in this land. So many lies have been told about who we are and what we are and where we come from. But, we had to ask the Most High to give us discernment to find these different books of knowledge and come back to Him at the end of the day. And we know that this world is given into the hands of the wicked because we see it all around us. Every day we turn on the news. It's always negative. It's always low frequencies, low vibration, death, murder, suicides, killings, scammers. All the world around you, people are trying to take from you. I told my future wife, I said, most people on this earth are full of shit, Not to say that there's not good people on this earth, but to have family and to have good friends that last a lifetime, that is a gem, and you should cherish that, because relationships help make us who we are, but also help us sustain this life that we're in. Now we're going to read page 108 notes. During the invasion of the Anu, known also as Anna, life forms from other constellations called Nibiru came to Tamat/Earth to subdue it. Tamat, known as the dragon, fought the Anunnaki, who fought back using highly advanced weapons that ultimately split Tamat. This is the story in the Bible of the dragon fighting the angels. Many of our religions are Anunnaki propaganda. Their main interest was our natural elements, especially the spirit of man and woman, termed the gold. Okay, so is that why we don't use gold or have the gold standard? Why did they take that away? Several situations ensued amongst these beings, even a muti amongst themselves, and pronouncing that right. These beings are responsible for the Nephilim stories of the Bible. they altered a race of what appeared to be pure spiritual beings of various types into spirit forms encased in flesh in which they could slave and master over. So we know that there's only two types of classes on the earth: master and slave, or business owner and employee, whatever term you want to use. Now back at reading page 108, it says, there was said to be a few amongst them that did not like the way humans were being abused, and thus they began to teach their favorites the ways of enhancing their bodies by linking them to their spirit to become as powerful as the Anunnaki, if not even more powerful, since we have the spirit element in us given by the Most High. These mysteries of enhancing the body later became known as the wisdom of the serpent. The correct term would be the wisdom of the spirit, who may relate to the serpent because of its spiraling movement and fiery nature. We also see this in the New Testament, where Hamashiach stated the serpent as well. Matthew chapter 10, verse 16, behold, I send you forth as sheep in the midst of wolves. Be ye therefore wise as serpents and harmless as doves, or intelligent as serpents, either or. And upon closing this video, we must remember that the Samaritans, or before the Hebrews or Israelites, our ancestors, we know that Abraham was a Akkadian from the Euro-Chaldees. So we must remember that stories are passed down from each generation, the cuneiforms, or so forth. But keep an open mind and use discernment with any information. But peace and shalom.